So I'm talking about cross-cultural relationships. To some extent, all relationships cross cultures. After all, we all come from different families when we come together to build a new partnership. For most of us, the natural union involves a set of comparisons and compromises that both parties find easy and natural to adjust to over time. For some, however, cultural differences are quite significant and require either one to view the world from the perspective of the other. This is always a challenge. Belonging to a culture with firm traditions induces loyalty. So much so that it's really hard to understand the culture and the traditions of others. I'd like to explain a little about the situation in a relationship where the two people have entirely different beliefs. What can happen is that these feelings about the beliefs can become paramount, the most important obstacle in the relationship. And in turn, this can completely drown out those feelings that we once had and that brought us together. Couples who are in multiracial relationships often face challenges that others do not. They may most importantly experience a lack or loss of identity. There may be arguments about each other's fundamental beliefs. Equally, there can be frequent arguments about parenting skills and discipline in the home. It may also be that these are challenges elsewhere from either family who are less supportive than they would have liked to be, and that is because of the cross culture. Also, think about those events we celebrate across the world: Christmas, Easter, Eid and other festivals. They may not have the same names across cultures. However, culturally, we are all entrenched in those values that dictate how we celebrate and with whom. Culture isn't really visible. It's not just about the national dish, the food we eat on a daily basis, and the way we cook it. No, nor is it about the clothes people wear, which gods they worship, or even the buildings they live in and the architecture that they are surrounded by. Culture is mainly invisible. We hardly ever acknowledge it until we're forced to change perspective and view it from outside the box. In the main, most of our actions, our thoughts, our beliefs, our words, and sometimes our feelings are manipulated and influenced by the culture we come from. Even from when we are children, our surroundings, cultural influences our behaviour and our ideas, our sense of self-esteem, our morals that separate our thoughts from what is right and what is wrong, our hopes and our dreams, our interests, our sense of value, what is important to us, whether it be freedom, family or money, our thoughts about the meaning of life and death. When we use the term cross-culture to talk about relationships, we truthfully mean to say something different. There are subtle differences and similarities between multicultural, cross-cultural and intercultural relationships. If you are in a multicultural relationship, we are referring to a society containing several cultures or ethnic groups. This can mean that people live alongside one another but do not necessarily engage and interact with other groups. An example of this might be that you live in a neighbourhood that has predominance of specific and particular nationalities or ethnic groups. Yet you're living peacefully together and it requires an understanding and tolerance of each other's culture. When we talk of cross-cultural relationships, we mean those partnerships that are involved with the compassion of different cultures. Whilst these involved in the partnership can describe and understand individual cultures, it can still be hard to bring about collective change. This can raise problems when two in a relationship have different cultures. Intercultural describes those communities and people that have a deep respect for all and other cultures in regard to relationships. This is the ultimate goal as the couple can grow and learn and flourish together. However, it can often be challenging to fully understand one another, to understand how the other one works or thinks, which is when conflict can arise. If you are someone who is currently in a cross-cultural relationship, it may be that some of the following is familiar for you. Perhaps you're finding yourself coping with religious differences or on a pretty regular basis. Perhaps you find yourself suffering from a loss of identity. Maybe you recognize that you are falling into a trap of daily arguments about the small stuff like cooking, cleanliness, rituals and standards. Do you have alternative views about the meaning of family, of the relationship and the love? Do you find yourself taking an entirely different approach to conflict? Are you both beginning to become estranged from your families? Do you challenge each other over how to live your lives? And then do you both find yourself getting resentful because you are both feeling under attack, and in particular you feel as though your culture and its values is being rejected? Perhaps you disagree about things to do with lifestyle, such as what you eat or drink. Many cultures have stringent views on food and alcohol consumption. Do you argue over what is suitable clothing and what is the norm and what is allowed and expected in your culture? Are gender roles causing conflict, especially when it comes to the distribution of household chores? Finally, what about money and the way your culture views and handles how people deal with money? Is this a point of conflict in your relationship? If you fall in love with someone who doesn't share your religious beliefs, how do you get around the fact that you might have differences? Maybe even opposite ideas about life. Are your beliefs compatible? Would you sacrifice some of your rituals or soften some of your beliefs to make your partner happy and content? Would you take the time to learn about their beliefs? Or perhaps even go with them to their mosque, church or temple? Incompatibility beliefs are some of the main challenges to those in cross-cultural relationships. Two people might love each other for good reason, but if a couple can't agree or meet on fundamental and essential values, conflicts can arise in some cultures. In some cultures and families, religion and their adherence to it is of the most importance. But with the advent of cheaper travel, the influence of the internet, social media and the world becoming such a much smaller place, therefore it becomes much harder to hold on to those religious values and traditions that some families hold so essential and dear. We could have a look at the practice of arranged marriages, for example. Increasingly, not all young people are happy to go along with this and consequently are more likely to fall in love with people outside of their religion. This can cause huge family risks and people are often forced to choose between their family and their partner. Also, when two people and two different religions have a child, they have to come to some kind of arrangement, an agreement about how they're going to bring up their child. Do they teach them about both religions and let their child decide when they're older? Or Do they choose one religion? So those ideologies and beliefs that we are raised to respect and live our lives by never really leave us. They never really leave us. It doesn't matter how old and where we are in life. Even if you reach a point in life where you lose or change your faith, those core principles you grew up with can leave their mark. Guilt is a big part of letting some of all your beliefs go. And the guilt can rapidly end up with one partner resenting the other for leading them away from their birth culture. Religious differences have been known to tear good, loving relationships apart. Learning how to deal with them is the key. But it doesn't always mean that religious differences have to signal the end of a relationship. Having opposing views about the world can be healthy and enrich the relationship and the experience of being together. You might try asking yourself the following questions. What does the role religion play in your relationship? What parts does it impact you? Your daily routine, your conversations? How does it change the way you feel about each other? When did religion start to become a problem in your relationship? Think of the beginning of the relationship and the role religion played back then. Can you retrieve those feelings? Your religion should not suffocate your personal identity. The two of you can learn to live side by side, accepting each other's beliefs while staying true to your own. Sometimes cross-cultural couples start not understanding each other at all because they do not share a language. But language is not always the words that we use. It's within our eyes, a shrug of the shoulders, a smile, a hug. However, normally at least one partner speaks the other mother tongue. Although a shared language is not necessary for a happy romance, not having one can really cause problems. What happens if your partner cannot understand your sense of humour or you cannot understand theirs? Is that a deal breaker for either of you? How often are you likely to misunderstand each other? If you cannot express properly, then how likely is it for conflict to arise? What happens when you're angry? Does lack of communication create boundaries and barriers? How do you bond with your partner and your partner's family and friends if you can't speak the same language? Is it a longer, more difficult road to persuading them that you are the right match for each other and you're the right partner? Be aware that making the effort by taking the time to learn their language, you can show that you want to be part of their world. Expressions of love take many forms. You can always try strengthening other communications using time and places to meet and avoid misunderstanding. Also, patience. They say is a virtue, and in this instance, it will be key to you finding new and exciting ways to communicate with your partner. Finally, if it's the case that you've moved from home to a different country, changed religion, or sacrificed your own culture to embrace your partnership, you may begin to feel detached from the person you used to be. When you integrate into a new culture, you, like everyone else, will often have to learn some of your old ways and that you have to learn to leave them behind. It's at this point that you might start to be thinking that you are losing a sense of identity, especially if you're feeling that you are missing those old ways. Who are you? Where do you really belong? Can you ever fit in? Should I retain my cultural values? Of course, counselling and therapy services can all help at separating the issues that put any relationship at stake. Talking to someone outside of the relationship puts a different perspective on things. Ask yourself, who am I? Am I really a product of my culture, or am I me?